Hey, it's me in Canada here. You are listening to the Trapes and Global on Wheels podcast hour, the place to be to learn about the latest and greatest life stories from people who are doing amazing disability advocacy work. Today, we had the pleasure of welcoming Grace Jun from Open Style Lab onto our show. As a designer, professor, and social entrepreneur, Grace equips her community with best practices to challenge quality of life for aging and people with disabilities, from designing graphic interfaces for smartphones and wearables to constructing accessible blazers for women with breast cancer. She has achieved incredible feats. And now, let's listen in on that conversation with Grace Jun. Grace Jun, welcome to the Trapes and Global on Wheels podcast hour.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Of course. So for listeners who are not as familiar with you, I know you've been featured on multiple big platforms, but for those who don't know you, let me read a little bio. So Grace Jun is the executive director of Open Style Lab and assistant professor at the School of Fashion in Parsons School of Design at the New School, where she teaches undergraduate and graduate students. Grace's work has received nationwide attention and has been featured at the White House Fashion Show celebrating inclusive design, assistive technology, and prosthetics, CNBC, Business of Fashion, Vogue, Forbes, and the NYTIMES Style. She has been asked to speak about disability in design in numerous settings from Design Indaba to South by Southwest. Open Style Lab started at MIT as a public service project. It is an annual 10-week summer program. Grace organized the first showcase at MIT in 2014 and has worked on developing clothing for people with autism, impaired vision, cerebral palsy, and many other disabilities. So thank you so much, Grace. We are so honored.
Thank you.
So to kick off with our first question, can you share with us how Open Style Lab got started and what was the original catalyst for OSL?
Yeah, actually, Open Style Lab began by two of my friends. And one was at MIT, the other one was at Brown. And they really had the best intentions when they realized, hey, medical health sciences and all of those things are really improving life as well as hospital development. But really, just getting on basic clothes was a challenge. And so they took that as their initiative, and I had joined in around 2015. And the original founder's name is Grace too. So we were like, oh, it's okay. We'll just just move the transition off. But I think the biggest thing that began and has developed is that there was just a lack of, I think, education and awareness on why clothing is still a barrier for people's greater independence or a better quality of lifestyle, and that it could be seen beyond just fashion. So that's why it employs designers, engineers, and therapists and people with disabilities to work together. Because it's not simple as something that's just about fashion or just frivolous clothes, but there are some medical benefits or physical benefits and potential for, I think, really innovative ideas. So that's how it all began.
I think that's wonderful, and I'm happy to see that it gaining traction, especially in the last few years with this adaptive design. So what is your long-term vision for OSL and adaptive clothing in general?
Yeah, I think so. My long-term vision for Open Style Lab is, I think, to grow a stronger community. It's really hard, and I'm sure you understand as well when you have a company and you're pretty much shouting to the world to care about something, to raise awareness for something, and to have that consistent, whether it's full-time staff or volunteers, there's a lot of management. But mostly, I think to respect, I think, people's expectations when they come in. I love looking at churches as a very interesting model versus big Forbes foundations or the contrast between what is volunteering, activism, and then also running a company, which you got to pay taxes for and such and such. But those things I think really have led me to probably just imagine the future of OSL to be bigger. So can this be replicable? Can we employ more people? How do we scale? So those are kind of the future questions I have moving forward. For adaptive clothing, I think that's a different story because I feel it's been 5 years that we've been doing this, and over that time, Tommy Hilfiger came along. I think Zappos. There's a lot of like new, and I'm glad to see also startup companies led by people with disabilities doing adaptive lines. I think Girls Chronically Rocked, I know it's by Keisha Greaves, is in Boston. Also, some of our friends who are in, I think it's NC, North Carolina, who are doing pants for wheelchair users, and they've collaborated together as friends. So just seeing that happen is, I think, a big change for adaptive fashion. But I hope that also opens businesses to people who are diversely, equipped for different abilities, not just the standard type of body or a type of CEO per se. Hopefully more.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll ask you more questions about that later, but I am happy to see that people with disabilities also being active in playing an active role in the adaptive fashion process. So I read this somewhere, and let me know if it's true. I read that you were, while you were a senior at Rhode Island School of Design, you were hit by a car, and the accident and your injuries made you slow down and open your eyes to things in life that you found unsatisfying. And so this temporary disability made you more aware of difficulties in the physical environment for those with disabilities as a whole. So where does your passion to create adaptive clothing come from? Just as, out of personal curiosity.
Yeah, I think you don't know where you're really going or what you want to do till you look back. And you're like, oh, after like a decade, I kind of see the things that I tried and failed, the things that I liked, and the experiences that I've had that's led me here. So I wouldn't say it's just that experience in college, but when I look back on it, I'm like, oh, I remember using like grippers for the first time with my left hand because my right side was injured. And so those moments made me more creative. And it also made me more alert and keen when I work with some of my friends with disabilities who are either struggling to put on clothes because the buttons haven't been invented for God knows how long and such, and other kind of accessories that are just, I think, cumbersome. And so when I see that, I'm like, oh, I remember doing that. And I particularly remember an instance where I had not made on time to an internship interview because it took me so long to get dressed. So I think those moments I've also identified with, but just on a more, I think, creative scale, I've loved fashion. I've loved the style, the embodiment of like how it could change someone's personality or expression. But I wasn't so keen on, I think, working in the industry. I thought there could have been a different way of expressing what clothes can do. And so I stumbled upon it after going into IT for a few years and then making my own designs in graduate school and then now open Style Lab. But I think the journey has led me to being like, actually, there really wasn't a road. There was nobody to give me, I think, a place where I wanted to express myself and to see how mobility really can be inspirational for more creative opportunities.
Well, I'm glad you came on this path because, you're clearly very talented, and I think you've started further progress the movement. I think it's just gaining traction, and hopefully it'll get running full speed. So, how and why is clothing and the freedom of expression through fashion especially important for people with disabilities? I think you started to talk about it, but further elaborate on that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I see a lack of, I think, accessible clothing is a barrier to anyone's independence. And that's speaking not just for myself, but my board as well. Christina Mallon, who is also a talented UX kind of marketing designer at Wonderman Thompson, but also has ALS and living her life to the best that she can for her 30s. And my friend Pinar, who just had her first baby. And by the way, for women, if you have a child, you're considered disabled. Like there's like a statement in your health kind of papers that say those things. So I think just overall, when I see those experiences, it makes me wonder that how do we get onto our lives when we need to get dressed and get out of bed? Like that's the first step. After you get clothed, you have to like, brush your teeth, go get something to eat. But if dressing is becoming something that's of a frustration, or it takes more than 15 to 20 minutes of your time, and it's not because you can't find something to wear in your closet, I think then there's something wrong there. Meaning like there's also an opportunity where there's challenges to look at dressing. So if it's a barrier to your greater independence, I see it in a couple of ways. Like if it takes you that long, it's also cutting back on the job interview you can go to. It can cut back on the work that you need to get to throughout the day. Time is money in New York. So as they say, you know, if you're wearing something and it takes too long, like functionally to put on, there should be something redesigned about it. And those are, I think, just some elements of, I think, clothing design that have good opportunities to be changed. But it's also, I think, about employment. And this is where I'm really proud to say, like at Open Style Lab, we try our best to employ many volunteers who have disabilities, whether they're writers or they're, you know, volunteering for visual arts or anything that they want to help out with. And because clothing, if it's for like an employment, I guess the word would be like requirement, like if there's a uniform or if there's a standard, but it's not designed for the seated body, is it really your fault that you got the interview, but there's like no standardized uniform for you? So those things, I think, become even a more frustrating barrier for someone who's got the job, which I've heard too. And then those who are like trying to get the job, getting a button-down shirt and looking well kept. The fact that I think for any assistive device, whether it's walkers to wheelchairs to canes, when it gets dirty and when it gets like across the ground, it's not your fault that New York City is dirty, but you're going to carry it with you. And we sometimes carry those things to meeting people. And that first impression, I think, really leads to someone understanding how clothing is a mode of self-expression. Like, are you well kept? Are you polished? Did you care about yourself when you're presenting to someone? And so, if so, how do we make those things more accessible for more people to have?
Yeah, it's so true. I lived in New York for just a little under 2 years, and the air is dirty. I live in DC now, Washington, DC. And I don't know if you encountered it with other wheelchair users that I've spoken to you, but I've struggled for so many years to keep my hands clean without gloves, pushing around, even though I'm just pushing the push rims. And I don't know, I think it's the air or something because the push rims aren't touching the ground. And so if Open Style Lab can find a solution to that, that would be amazing. I know many wheelchair users struggle with that, you know, because for first impressions and the ones after that are so important. And we're living in a more superficial society than ever before, I feel. Perhaps that's a personal opinion. And these things are becoming more and more important.
Right. I mean, I
So,
think we saw it at the Met Gala recently. You know, the theme was camp. It was about a superficial glamour and hyped up, exaggerated type of costumes. But I think there's also a chance there for people of diverse bodies to play very creatively with that language. And if it is the vibe that's coming off, I think we just got to ride it on top. And I know April Coughlin, shout out to April. She really helped design some of the first rain jacket gear as well as the gloves that were made with our fellows. So I know that they're really adamant on trying to continue on their own. So I hope they get that done together.
that's awesome. Are the gloves on the market? Is it gonna be on, retail? You're gonna put it in the big box stores at all?
I mean, maybe not under OSL, but I hope each fellow team, they're entitled to go off on their own to make some of their work more accessible. And I hope they do. But usually people get very busy, or I guess it's hard to sometimes do group activities. But I hope the more and more than just selling something, they actually share those kind of concepts and get a better understanding about each user, because everyone's hands are different too. So
Yeah.
hopefully they're still working on it.
Yeah. So the next few questions are all similar. I'm going to ask them at the same time. And I think the latter questions are the ones that we really can dig into to avoid repetition. So Is it crucial for people with disabilities to actively pursue the skills to create inclusive clothing? If yes, why? How can we increase the disabled population's interest in the fashion industry? How can we make that industry more appealing to people with disabilities?
Okay, that's a very good question. I think first, yes, if you have a chance to learn any skill, yes, take it, whether you're a person with a disability or not. So if you're a person with a disability and you're interested in learning about fashion, I think three of the things, housing, food, clothes, they're essential to everybody. So many of my friends, and even when I see some of my students who are not in fashion, they're a little more or less exposed to, I think, just even sewing a button. Because back then, like your grandma would tell you, or your mom would kind of teach a little bit about that, but there less and less those skills are being transferred. And I think it's really important to have that, especially when you don't need to take it to a tailor for 35 bucks and you got the tailor done wrong. And at least like equipped yourself with the knowledge. But also I think there's ways where they could also educate many people on how to reinvent tools, whether it's scissors, it's sergers. You know, there are so many ways you could be creative, and it doesn't need to be just for a right-handed, you know, hand size for like a grip that I think people with disabilities could really be empowering for. And probably the best example would be in my class. I really see them as clientele and also mentors. So they have the opportunity to lead one of the nation's leading design students and groups in the school at Parsons how to think about disability. Like you're imposing so much great inspiration and leadership and have the ability to change how people think, especially at that young age. So I feel like people with disabilities have a big role to play, and more. And so I hope they're comfortable, you know, expressing themselves, because I know not everyone is comfortable kind of talking about their experiences, whether it is through injury or it is through disability by acquired by birth. So the more and more I think they're open about it and they're just owning it, the better.
Yeah, I agree with you. So the next question is, how can we get more fashion design schools to teach and bring awareness to the need for adaptive, inclusive clothing?
Yeah, I think that's an excellent question. One would be probably to hire more people with disabilities, but I think whereas I hear that as being the main source, it's also I think the people with disabilities to have that opportunity for that education. So I'd be proud to say that we're like partnering with NYU Lango's Women with Initiative with Disabilities this summer, and they're young teen girls. So honestly, you know, many of them will find it difficult to afford a four-year college at like an art school and pay a lot of materials, et cetera, et cetera. But that doesn't mean they should not learn or not have the skills. So I think for many institutions, it's how do we branch out those educational components to be more accessible, not just all based on, I guess, high tuition, hopefully. And if there's ways to do it, that's the way that we're doing it, is to bring little doses of, I think, design to a larger group, so that hopefully when they're equipped and they're able to see this as a job experience or an internship experience or a fellowship or a residency, that they could place it also not only on their resume, but their life to then go strive and look for opportunities where they could be in teaching positions at institutions, but they might have cerebral palsy, or they could be advocates for some of the leading boards at academic schools, but they might have spinal cord injury. Like it shouldn't matter, but I think the more that they're employed, probably the better. And second, being a teacher, I never knew how hard it would be, but it's hard work. You have to multitask. So I think probably emotional stamina would be probably a big thing to ask yourself if that's really the right choice for you. To think that you really don't. I feel like I don't know anything every time I talk to my students. So to like maybe not be humble, but also realize how to break out of your own stereotypes or perspectives is super key if you want to share anything. So I think that's what I would encourage for anyone who wants to get into the educational or academic field who has a disability, is to employ them, find new models of learning, and then also be open to knowing that you actually don't know anything, and it's okay.
Yeah, no, those are great points. And I feel like you're definitely very open to learning and have recruited people of disabilities of all different kinds. And so I appreciate that. And one question I am curious about is how are you guys going about recruitment? Um, and then how do you find your clients with disabilities? And are you looking to expand and find more clients elsewhere in the country or even in the world?
Yeah, that's a great question. So for our fellows, we make an international call, and we've gotten people from Mongolia to South Korea to Hong Kong. They've come in from different disciplines. So we select them on a very interesting basis. This is not always if you have like a nice robust resume. We do interview them. We've had almost a year that we had over 200 applicants, which was insane. So the need is there, I think, for the willingness to learn and to work with people with disabilities in a genuine way where learning is fostered. But I also strongly think it's also how much they see the world or they're willing to open up to see it. You could work at the top companies and your resume is really robust, but if you don't have that kind of open mindset or you haven't done a little bit of homework, it doesn't help us because then we're like, oh, okay, well, this might be interesting when it's going to be a group collaborative. For our clientele, I'm really happy to, I think, over the past 2 years and being in New York, I've made some good friends, whether it's April, Q, Sean Horn, just like friends that just became friends. And they've introduced me to the mayor's office for people with disabilities, United Spinal with Debbie. There's just so many great organizations that I've been trying to put myself out there, whether it's like Abilities Expo, and just putting yourself out there and putting, I think, the word out, what Open Style Lab is doing has attracted more clientele. But believe it or not, I think after doing it for about 5 years, I feel the best clients that work with us are people who have a lot of high energy and are willing to look at some uncomfortable things in their life, but are willing to share that. And especially for, I think, some of our fellows who are younger, when they're at a younger age, to own some emotional frustration or anger or stress that you have through advocacy in a positive light is really the best type of candidate we look for. Because you can be pissed off about a lot of things like taxis and rush hour, but it's one thing to, I think, really bring it to a collaborative atmosphere. So we really look for that kind of maturity and just like ownership of self, your body, and acknowledging, yes, there's change to be made, but we're going to do it as fun as possible.
Yeah, I think having an open mind is definitely very important because, rather whether you have a disability or don't have a disability, it's uncomfortable certain situations.
Yeah.
And if you can't laugh about it and find the joy or the learning opportunity in it, then it's going to be extra difficult.
Right.
So I agree with you on that. So I know you're a self-taught coder. I read that somewhere. How do you think you can interweave your coding skills into fashion and improve the adaptive fashion industry slash movement?
Ooh, well, I have many ideas for that. I've had several ideas, I think, over the past years. But one, I had made a garment that tracks somewhat your range of motion. And it was made in consultation with a physical therapist. And because I was taking my mom to Northwell Health Hospital when she had tendonitis surgery. So which means she couldn't drive. So I had to drive her there. And I noticed a lot of the women in Long Island at that hospital had been breast cancer survivors. So I was like seeing some commonality between how your movement of your arms are being measured through therapy and tracked across different injury cases. And when I made it, I put in a couple of sensors, a microprocessor that's like an Arduino, and then tried to look at the XYZ axis for someone to see like how their range of movement is because usually when you go to PT, you might talk about how you've improved throughout the week only once, but you don't see it like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. So I think that's what got me into trying to make my own first wearable garment device. Because as much as I love and I admire the people who've been pioneering a lot more 3D printing and I think really interesting ways of material manipulation, I always just thought I wanted to create something with technology and fashion that is very purposeful and that has, I think, an applicable, output, but it's also beautiful. So I made that, and then yes, I donated it to the FIT museum. But I knew it worked for one woman, which was an elderly lady that I've worked with. I'll just keep her name anonymous for now, but she worked like literally and lived down the street by Parsons, so it was really easy for me to go back and fit her, and then cut, and then solder something, and if the chip wasn't working, go back and fit her and try those things. But that's just, I think, one example case. Other things is I feel I've been working with Christina, and the more and more I watch Christina, she types with her toes. And I'm like, all right, we got to figure out between me and my other friends and Christina, is there a better way for her to type? Is there a better way for her to communicate? And you've seen so many great initiatives at like Microsoft or at Verizon, that there's technology that could really employ and make things easier, not just simply ordering a burrito, getting to your house faster, but really for your job. So I think those kind of things, I just love playing with stuff. So if I have a chance and I have a Google Home, and then I had an Alexa, like I'd like to like play with them, to take them apart and see if they could talk to each other and just kind of see what all the hype is about, to better understand if some of this technology can be repurposed. But other than just circuits, I think also technology, it could be also in materials. So some of the things that we've used, and I'm still learning while I'm not a material scientist, is that there are like temperature regulating fabric. There's also conductive fabric. So there's really great advances, I think, that are getting at a micro scale, which is really important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's wonderful. I think, yeah, technology in general is progressing so fast. But if you look at the adaptive industry or assistive technology, medical devices, for me, I'm specifically thinking of manual wheelchairs because that's what I use every day, right? Right? That's more important than my legs, if you're speaking about it in a functional point of view. And if you look at that progression versus the progression of cars, it's much faster. We have the technologies to advance these things in other sectors as well. But why is it not happening? Is it because it's not prioritized, it's not valued, that population is not valued? The message that is sending out, I feel like it's very negative. And so that's why I feel very encouraged and very empowered by what you're doing and the mission, the vision that you have. So what are some challenges to bringing universal design, fashion, fashionable clothing to the mainstream market so far? What are the obstacle courses currently in the way? Based on your 5 years of experience so far, I'm sure you've attempted at bringing a product to market.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of misunderstanding. One is, I think people are like, why isn't Open Style making clothes? I mean, maybe we will one day, but it's actually a lot more complicated. Fast fashion has probably jeopardized a lot of our environmental resources. There's also labor rights. And I think also just fashion slowing down as an industry to incorporate more people with disabilities is still not there. So to me, I'm like, I don't want to make another jacket if it has not brought in all of those three components, and it's a lot to do. It's not just simply putting it on Kickstarter and thinking 20 pieces is okay. But I feel if it's made, and this is what we do at Open Style, I mean, give it to the person with a disability, it's more meaningful. And hopefully people will keep it. And I think, they'll keep it for a long time. So I think that kind of nostalgic and also value currency is one of the barriers and misunderstandings that is coming from like, oh, it's fashion, so why don't we have more clothes? But I was like, well, they're going through their own shift of supply labor sources and interesting challenges there. But that also brings opportunities. So I think other challenges that brings opportunities that I've seen is it's just understanding that maybe anything related to disability, whether it's the podcast that you're doing, the nonprofit organizing I'm doing, is not just charity work. It's like, we like to do it because it's fun and there's actually great innovation there. And to not see it as charity work is very important, I think, to me. And what I've been trying to convince large corporations is like, if you give those funds and donate to us, it's not simply disappearing or we're having a show. They're actually fueling innovation, and they come from the people that are of service and of need. But they could also give you back all of those ideas as well. So you could employ maybe more people, and you could also maybe benefit in learning, oh, okay, this is a market segment that's 1 out of 5 people with disabilities in the US, which is quite huge, but also 4 out of 5 people who may know someone with a disability, who may love someone with a disability. So I think they're missing that opportunity. And the very fact that we're all aging, so we're all going to face something anyway. And I sure don't like the current standard of healthcare today. So, so there needs to be some change. But I really feel that that's probably some of the barriers in fashion that I see. And really, after 5 years, it's not about making something, but the act of making something, the knowledge exchange, the sense that you're learning, and it's meaningful learning. It's not just memorizing words on a textbook that you're never going to use again. But it's like, oh, if I am someone who's in a wheelchair, I have just learned working with one of the leading fashion design students from FIT or an engineer from MIT for this summer on how to maybe fix the clothes that I want to fix by myself after. Just some sort of, I think, knowledge exchange from different disciplines is really crucial, and we don't have enough of that. So I think that's what I've learned.
So, last question. So, why is adaptive, inclusive, universal design, fashion, however you like to call it, good for the bottom line? Make a case for why adaptive clothing is good for business and why other businesses in the fashion industry and perhaps other industries should follow suit.
So I think adaptive clothing is going to be crucial for all businesses to increase also their market. I mean, I'm not going to call it a charity case again. I think there's a huge market that's being neglected, and you're missing out, and that's just straight up capital. Second, it's also to employ a different perspective. Like if you're missing out on 1 out of 5 people, then you're also missing a diverse perspective of people who can give you innovative ideas. So the better that you employ it, the more I think it'll be useful. And I found, I think there's also retention. When something is made and it's fit and it works well for you, and you're like, wow, I need this. It's very different versus like, I would like to have this. So I think for retailers and for people in the industry to see that as a big business opportunity is the first thing I would say. And then second is just having, I think, more people that are going to bring in innovative ideas, because you're constantly churning out new seasons, you're constantly churning out new types of looks. But wouldn't it be better if you had that diverse group to tell you where those seasonal looks are maybe going, or like what kind of lifestyle are these people living? And you won't know that until you actually work with someone. So that's what I would urge the fashion industry or people, those in the companies and big conglomerates to look at, which I think some are.
Yeah. Grace, thank you so much. I feel like it's very important work that you're doing. And even though Tommy Hilfiger and some others are coming on, I think the more the better. I don't think this industry at this current time can have too many that are doing this kind of work. And I think it can be even stronger, perhaps with some collaboration at some point as well.
Thank you.
Now, Grace and I would love to hear from you. What piece of clothing gives you the most difficulty putting on? How can adaptive fashion improve to make going to work easier for you?
Did you like this video? If so, share it with your friends and be sure to follow us on social media. And if you want even more resources, be sure to sign up for our email updates on our website, traipsingglobal.com. Keep learning new perspectives, keep being inclusive, because it will make the world a better place for you and for everyone else. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you on another episode of the Traipsing Global on Wheels podcast hour.